Um, I developed Maggie to be kind of a cross between Jessica Fletcher and Katharine Hepburn. Kind of, the Katharine Hepburn personality, the Jessica Fletcher investigator. So people who like older women sleuths. And she actually brings in some of her friends. So you have a group of older retired people who work together to solve the mystery. Something a little bit like that new series that's out of England, the people in the retirement home that solve mysteries. It's similar to that. I think the audience, I think, is women over 40 who like murder mysteries. That's the big target audience. But men seem to be enjoying it also.
Welcome back to Living the Next Chapter, the author podcast. We get to talk to great authors from around the world, and today we get to talk to Bonnie. I'm excited to have her on our show. She's got Buried Bones. It's a new book out there for everybody, doing great things. A lot of people really enjoying the book. Some great reviews we'll talk about as well. Bonnie's here to talk about her story. Bonnie, welcome to Living Next Chapter. Glad to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's good to be on.
Excellent. Tell everybody, Bonnie, where you are in this great big world of ours.
I'm in Salt Lake City now.
Very good. Excellent. Is that born and raised in Utah?
No. We came here. My dad was in the Air Force. He was stationed at the Air Force base here, and then he retired here. Okay. I stayed in Utah long enough to finish college, and then I moved to San Francisco for 25 years. And then from San Francisco, I went to D.C. for 20 years. So I get around.
And now you're back again.
Now, my son moved back to Utah and had children and settled down here. So when I retired, I came here, to be around the grandkids.
What are you retired from for our listeners who are listening in?
My first career was accounting, and then I went to law school, and then I got this position with the CPA firm in Washington, D.C. as a special consultant managing special projects. So I did an assortment of things. I had some fraud cases. I had just mismanagement kinds of things, big systems problems and things like that. So because I had this varied background, I could do almost anything they threw at me. So,
that's not the super sexy CSI TV type stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. But I got some good stories,
But necessary, right? Super necessary.
It was. Yeah.
Any stories that you can share with us? Can I give us a little insight of what you were doing?
One of the big projects I worked on was a discrepancy between the federal government and the state government over Medicaid payments. Okay. Federal government was asking for $55 million in overpayment, and what I determined was D.C. government didn't owe them anything. It was a mistake at the federal level.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that's a big number, too.
$5 million in the budget,
That's something that needs an explanation. Yeah. That's good.
And it ended up being very simple accounting mistake.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So you've always enjoyed numbers then?
My first degree was in accounting. I learned accounting because it's an easy way to get a job. So I have this background in business, but I got bored with it and went to law school. Yeah. Graduated when I was 50.
Wow.
So, but I was also interested in writing kind of all along, and just as a hobby. And when I was in D.C., I started taking classes at a place called the Writers Center, which is very well known. And I wrote a manuscript that I still have, and I think it's a good story. And one of these days I'll go back and clean it up maybe. But when I retired and came to Utah, I decided to take it up as a hobby and took more writing classes. And Buried Bones actually started out as a project in one of my classes. It was the class on how to write a murder mystery. And so I put together this idea and just stayed with it after the class ended. And took me 5 years, but I got it done.
Are you a murder mystery reader
Oh,
yourself?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I, you know, um, and having a law background, it makes it more interesting to see what people do.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Any authors come to mind? Some people that inspire you as a reader?
Initially, of course, I read some of the traditional ones, Agatha Christie, P.D. James. I particularly like P.D. James.
Hmm.
And I was really into the English um, murder mysteries. Elizabeth, I don't remember her name. She,
Yeah.
uh, she's a current author. Elizabeth George. I read
Okay.
12 of her novels right in a row.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, there's a variety of, it's always interesting. Some of them get the procedures right, some of them get the law right, some of them don't.
Yeah. And you'd have that perspective. That's interesting. Did you find that those authors you admire have an influence on your writing at all?
I think so. Um,
Yeah.
I what I tend to do when I find a book I like is I'll outline it, go back and study the book. And P.D. James was one that I studied early on. She's very detailed. She's very almost over detailed, but she would actually, I was taking a class where we studied P.D. James, and so part of the process was understanding her work, and I found her to be a good influence.
Because I think that's like for me, I'm a musician and I like to deconstruct songs to see how the song was made. So then
Exactly.
I can kind of figure out that. And I find that enjoyable. So, similar way, you like to deconstruct the book and kind of see how the book was brought to be, right? Yeah.
Yes, take those things that they teach you in class and say this is how you're
Yeah.
supposed to do it, and then read a very popular, well-known book and see how well it fits. I did that.
Yeah. That's interesting. I had an author on yesterday and he is a screenwriter. He said, go get the screenplay for a movie and you can probably find it online somewhere. And then open the screenplay and then watch the movie.
Uh-huh.
And compare the two, the movie to the screenplay, and you can see kind of how this whole movie came to be and where they kind of went away from the script. He's like, it's a really fun exercise. So I like it for music, you like it for books, and then screenwriters like to do that for movies. I thought that was interesting.
It's a good way to learn, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great way to learn. Pick somebody you admire, and you're not trying to copy them, but you're learning from them and their approach to how they write. It's great.
And in fact, Stephen King wrote um, a, a, a three-book series, a mystery series, which I deconstructed. And to study Stephen King is always interesting.
With your accounting background and your law background, I can see how you can leverage that skill set of taking a bunch of numbers, breaking them all down, making sense of it, coming up with the problem and the solution, and then applying that to your writing. Same kind of pattern, but now from something a little more enjoyable as a hobby at first, and now becoming a little more important for you as an author. That's interesting. Yeah. So, what is it about writing that is different and exciting compared to some of the amazing things you've done in the past for career wise?
I think one of the things I'm really enjoying about writing is that you have to have a deep understanding of how people behave. Um, because a reader will pick it up if you don't get it quite right. Um, so for instance, I'm working on the sequel to Buried Bones right now, and I'm in a critique group. And so they were critiquing one of my chapters last week, and I had a situation where one character was supposed to say something that was slightly insulting to another character, and it didn't say it quite right, and she didn't respond quite right, and they pointed that out. So I spent all day yesterday fixing that. Because
Interesting.
it didn't come out, it didn't sound right to them, and it wasn't. I didn't get the words quite right, but I worked on it, and
Okay.
you really have to um, pick apart how people communicate and how they feel, how they respond. and get it down on paper. So there's one aspect that when you're talking to people, you have a certain reaction or an understanding of what they say, but the words may not be quite right, but you have to get right on paper.
Right. And people will pick up on that if it doesn't feel right
Exactly.
as you read it, right? You're like, that doesn't seem like a normal interaction between two people. It feels off a little bit,
Exactly.
right?
And
Yeah.
a good critique group will do that. And I have found a good, really nice critique group.
How did you find this group?
Well, um, a woman who interviewed me on a podcast a couple of months ago, she and I just kept chatting, and she's a member of the critique group in Colorado. And she says, why don't, and I was complaining because I hadn't found anything in Utah that really was working for me. Uh, the uh, the writers organization I belong to are a lot of younger writers, and they're really into sci-fi and fantasy, and that's not my style. And they weren't picking up on what I was writing, the maturity of my characters. And so anyway, she and I just kept chatting, and she says, "Why don't you join our group? It's a Zoom meeting, and you can be a member from anywhere." So I joined it, and they're people more my age, and so they understand the characters, and they're also serious writers, and that makes a big difference. So I'm getting some really good feedback from them, and
Nice.
I enjoy being there. You know, they seem to be functioning at kind of the same level I am.
Nice. It's nice to do something in community. Because
Yes,
I think when I talk to authors on this show, many authors start off on their own, writing by themselves with no real connection with the outside world, and no other feedback to kind of help their writing to be better. And when they finally go to an editor, there's so many things that they've missed because they haven't had input from somebody else who writes. So the idea that you're writing in community, I think that's a really wise thing. For authors that are listening, from your perspective, Bonnie, you found this person through a podcast, which is great, but just can you reinforce the idea that writing in community is a good thing for a newer author that's listening?
I think it's very valuable. And in fact, when I finally finished Buried Bones, and it was my COVID project, so I was not involved in the writing group very much. But when I finished it and I sent it to friends and people willing to read it, the feedback I got was feedback I probably should have gotten during the whole writing process. And I ended up hiring an editor and going through 3 rewrites on it. But I got the feedback from the editor, which provided that, and then another person looked at it and made some recommendations, and so it's been this process of I kept getting feedback from people. I had to search them out and find them, but the feedback was very valuable in terms of the rewrites, and
Well,
you know they say your first draft is always awful, and it is.
but you've come a long way, though. We talked before we record that this Buried Bones is up for a review from Kirkus. Like, this is like a big thing. So, can you kind of tell us a little bit about the more recent feedback you're getting on the book? It's out in the world. What people are saying about the book? What's some responses you're hearing?
The professional reviews have all been really good. The Kirkus review blew me away.
Right.
They ended with a very positive comment that it was a well written, complex mystery. I think they called it intelligent. So I used that comment. I've been using that comment in the promotional effort. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was notified that my book has been selected to be in their printed magazine. And they told me about 25% of the reviews go into the magazine. And so it comes out. September the 1st. I'm just blown away about that.
Wow.
So they liked it enough.
It's a great acknowledgement for you, right? When you're starting this book, maybe the idea of ever being reviewed by Kirkus and that kind of, you know, recognition from them wouldn't even been in your mind at the beginning when you first started writing.
Well, exactly. When I first started sending it out for reviews, I said, "Oh no, I'm not going to do Kirkus. They'll just beat me up." But after I got a couple of good reviews from other people, I said, "All right, it's worth the money. I'll do it. We'll see what happens." And it turned out better than I thought.
That's amazing. Let's talk about the story about Buried Bones. That's for the readers that are here. They haven't read it yet. They're interested. They're curious. Can you kind of give us an overview? What's the story about? And let's bring the readers into what you've written.
Okay. The protagonist, her name is Maggie Anderson. I'm writing a Maggie Anderson series. She is a retired prosecutor, moved to Utah from Washington, D.C. She kind of had a bad experience on her last case. She had an innocent suspect who was killed by vigilantes, and so it freaked her out a little bit. She decided it was time to retire, so she moved to Utah, where her son happened to live. And so she's been in Utah for a couple of years. She's in a social group. They go on a weekend vacation on Labor Day, and one of them owns a cabin up in the mountains. So they go there and they go out to this little diner, and they're in the diner, and this guy walks in, and everybody in the diner kind of freaks out. And she turns to her friend who's from that area, says, "What's this all about?" And he says, "Well, they just dug up his ex-wife's body. He's the suspect." Okay. So then a group of cowboys goes over and they try to kick him out, and of course the restaurant manager comes out and calms that down. But so she's freaked out a little bit because it looked like it was going to be another vigilante kind of situation. But when they're getting up to leave, she decides to go over and talk to him. She decides that he's outnumbered. So she goes over and talks to him, and she gives him a business card, and she says, "I don't practice law here, but I could help you find somebody if you need some help." He says, "Oh, no, no, I'm innocent. I didn't do anything." And she says, "Okay," and she leaves, and he calls her the next day and says, "I've had second thoughts." So they start this conversation. But the legal issue in the book is an innocent man is being accused of murdering his ex-wife because the town doesn't like him. And the town doesn't like him because after a 15-year marriage, he realized he was gay and got a divorce and he moved. And so there's a lot of prejudice against being gay. And so the town has decided that he killed his wife because he wanted to get out of the marriage and go be a gay man. So that's the underlying legal issue. And she finds an attorney for him, and she becomes the investigator on the case. And so she goes up to the little small town in the mountains and hangs out and starts investigating. And it's a 4-year-old murder, so it's a little bit hard to find facts and things, but she starts digging. She comes up with some things that kind of lead her in the wrong direction, but eventually she pulls together enough facts that she had suspicions about who the murderer is.
Okay.
But there's a very powerful family that kind of runs things in the town. And she has 2 or 3 suspects that are members of this family. And so it becomes very political. The town actually wants the case to be declared a cold case. Let's just forget about it. But she just keeps pushing through, and she finally uncovers enough evidence that she has someone she can accuse. Now, he's actually not the murderer, but he leads her to someone else who is. So it's a complicated investigation, but kind of has to be for a 4-year-old murder. But she does come up with the right. She gets she gets a confession, and um, it has a big impact on the town.
So anybody from a small town would probably enjoy a story like this. Anytime anybody loves murder mysteries will love this. Investigations. Who else would be a great reader for this book? Who do you have in mind?
Um, I developed Maggie to be kind of a cross between Jessica Fletcher and
Yep.
Katharine Hepburn. Kind of,
Okay. Wow.
the Katharine Hepburn personality, the Jessica Fletcher investigator. So people who like um, older women sleuths, and she actually brings in some of her friends. So you have a group of older retired people who work together to solve the mystery. Something a little bit like the that new series that's out of England, the people in the retirement home that solve mysteries. It's similar to that.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think the audience, I think, is women over 40 who like murder mysteries. That's the big target audience. But men seem to be enjoying it also. So,
All right. Yeah, it's kind of nice when the audience can, as they're listening to this, they're listening for themselves, they're listening for somebody they know and love who would also love the story. So I always kind of like to narrow down
yeah.
kind of who you think is an ideal reader. I think that really helps for us as listeners as well.
Mhm.
It's good. You said this is a series in the making, like there's more we can expect from you
Oh,
down the road.
yes. Yeah, I'm like 120 pages into the sequel now.
Wow. Wow. That's
And
great.
and what's going to happen is Maggie Anderson is going to be working on the defense side. Most murder mysteries are a detective or an investigator trying to find someone who committed a murder. Maggie Anderson is going to be helping people who get caught up in legal situations they don't know what to do with.
Mm.
Um, I'm taking elements of the law that I know about that cause problems for people, like charging an innocent suspect.
Yeah.
The second, um, the book I'm working on now deals with self-defense. So I'm lots of people do get caught up in legal issues. I'm trying to make an interesting story out of some of these conflicts that people have sometimes, where it becomes a very complex situation.
Why is that so important to you? Why is that theme of the person who is innocent being treated poorly or misunderstood, maybe even hurt or injured because of, somebody else believes them to be guilty and they're not? Like, why is that so important to you as an author?
I think sometimes the justice system ignores people like that. That justice is not always for everybody. You have to be able to pay an attorney. You have to be able to endure the machinations of the court system. And it's very difficult for somebody who's not normally involved in that. Um, you also have situations where people have power and control, and they get away with things that the normal person can't. Um, it's very easy to manipulate a situation in the law, which annoys me.
And it's been long held that in law, you're innocent until proven guilty, but in public opinion, you might be guilty until you're proven innocent, right? The opposite.
And even if somebody is proven innocent, oftentimes their lives are ruined.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
Right.
I think it's much harder for the ordinary person to find justice than it is for someone who can pay a good attorney.
It happens too often, actually, when you see somebody released from prison and they've served 20 years for something they never did.
Exactly.
But they were put there, somebody put them there, and they didn't have somebody in their corner, like your character from your book, to speak for them and help them navigate something when they're completely innocent. And they don't even understand why they're being questioned about this thing because they are truly innocent, right? So they end up behind bars because nobody cared for them in the process, right? And helped guide them, right?
Mhm. Um, yeah, I think that's an underlying problem with the legal system, and
Yeah.
it's probably worse in other types of legal systems. But we still haven't worked things out for um, justice for all.
So there's that underlying message there then
Mhm.
within your story.
Mhm.
There's a theme that you're trying to uncover and develop for us as readers. I like that.
Yeah,
Does the theme come first, or does the theme come during the story of process of writing the story?
I I think the thing kind of, I look for a situation that I think in Barry Bones it ended up just coming because I needed to have a story with lots of tension in it.
Yeah.
In the second book I'm writing, it's more because um, I have a sense about my character being mistreated by the system, and I just kind of came up with an idea, an area that I thought um, doesn't get enough attention, and so that's what I'm writing about. I mean, it may be that nobody wants to read about it, but I think it's the kind of story that should be told.
As the author and creator of this character, as you talk about Maggie and her story, is there anything about her at this point that you're not really fully aware of? I mean, you still don't know about her and her character. Something that you're still curious about her that might come out later on in future books.
Well, I actually built Maggie's history partly on my own history because it gives me a better insight into who she is. Now, she's had experiences that I haven't necessarily had. I've had experiences that I'm not putting into her character, but I think I think that gives me insight into who she is. And some of the um, people who have reviewed the book have commented about how deep the character building is on her. And just because I know her pretty well, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
um, there will be things that come up. I haven't gotten much further than book two yet. I haven't planned out any more necessarily, but I have some ideas in mind. Um,
okay.
and they won't necessarily be my experiences, but I think that I can imagine how she would behave and
Yeah.
and think about things and how she would put things together.
Is it important for you to place your characters in the story in a location that's familiar to you? So you're talking about Utah, you're talking about Washington. Like these are places you would know. Is that important for you as an author to place the story in those settings?
I think well I think it's useful for these two settings, and I've been many places.
Yeah.
Um, I'm thinking about taking her to San Francisco and doing a story there. I lived in San Francisco for 25
Yeah.
years.
Right.
Um, so I know San Francisco. When I was back east, I traveled up and down. I could probably write a book based in New York City. So I'm not going to be uncomfortable finding a different location. In fact, it might add some interest to find another location. Um,
Yeah.
so, but I'm starting out here. And the
Yeah.
only reason I started out here was because I was in that class on murder mysteries, and we had to have a story. And somebody told me about a cabin that his family had up in the mountains, and I says, "Oh, that's a good location. I think I'll write a story about that." So that's
There you
how
go.
we ended up in the mountains. Is somebody told me about a cabin. And I actually drove up there and drove around just to get a feeling for the area.
See, now that's the stuff that a reader wouldn't know. The work that you do behind the scenes as an author to understand the scene and the location and what it feels like. I had one author on the show. He wrote a book about, Sherlock Holmes in London, England. So he went to London for a period of time so he could experience what does a London fog feel like?
Well, not
What do the streets sound like when you walk down the street? He retraced the steps of Sherlock Holmes because he wanted to feel that and bring that feeling into his book. He didn't want to write it from the comfort of his home in the U.S. He put himself into uncomfortable situations and being there in London just so he could feel what possibly his character felt. And that he felt that really gave his character some realism for a reader because he was there and he knows what it feels like. So I like that you did the same thing and took a drive and go check out the cabin and that location. And right, I like that when authors use their surroundings because you know them pretty well. I think that kind of feeds its way into the story. Just like an influence from another author could influence you, your surroundings can influence you as well.
Yeah, I think I mentioned 20 years ago when I lived in DC, I wrote a manuscript. And in that manuscript, I had some scenes in New Orleans. That story actually dealt with the civil rights movement, and uh, or it started with the civil rights movement and black and white relations afterwards. But anyway, there was a scene in New Orleans, and I actually went to New Orleans and spent several days in Louisiana. So when I wrote the scenes in New Orleans, for instance, I had my character there, I think it was in 1968. And when I was in New Orleans, I bought this little book that talked about New Orleans, and it said, oh, the Superdome was built in 1968. So I had my character walking down the street and watching them build the Superdome. But yes, that's
Yeah,
exactly the kind of thing
right,
that you're talking about, is you have to be there. Um,
right.
and there was another scene in that book that was in North Carolina, and my husband and I, we drove to North Carolina to this little outpost, and the scene took place on an island, and I was trying to figure out which island to use, and we kind of drove out there, and we discovered that a bridge had been washed out. A bridge to this island had been washed out, and I said, "Oh, that's exactly what goes on in my story. Is I need a washed out bridge." So I took pictures of this washed out bridge, and I used that to describe the island and what they found. So yes, it's very useful to do that.
See, now that's I find that really interesting, Bonnie. I love that. For readers, then, when they buy Buried Bones, they're going to read it for the first time. Do you have a message before they open the cover of the book and read for the first time? Any message to the readers that we can share?
I hope they like it. And if they like it, they
Yeah.
should write me a review. um,
Right?
I think it's a story that people have a hard time putting down. And I hope the readers find that to be the truth for them.
And there's more to come.
And
That's
there's
even
more to
better.
come, yes.
I like that. That's a good thing to know as well. Bonnie, where do we go? I have your website up while we're looking here and talking. Tell us about your website and a little bit more about connecting with you after listening to this episode, and we want to follow your journey as an author. Where do we go?
My website is bonniemorebooks with an S.com. There is another author named Bonnie Moore, so we have to, and she has one called Bonnie Moore Book or something like that. So we have to have that S on the end. That's probably the best way. I'm on take. I've got an author page on Facebook, um, and I'll always have my books on Amazon. But to follow me, I'm going to start writing some weekly posts on the uh, Facebook page and on my website, dealing, just keep the readers informed.
What I like on your website too, Bonnie, is you have a tab for your characters from your book and the investigation team. I don't see a lot of authors doing this. I think it's quite unique and special for you that you actually give us a little bit. You treat your characters like they're part of your team. Like you have like a write-up for them, kind of little bio information about them. I think that's helpful for the readers to come and read your book, to read a little bit more about the characters. I think that's quite unique for your website.
Well, thank you. And we actually have that in the front of the book too.
Yeah.
One of the things I've always found is when I'm reading a story, I almost have to keep a list of the characters to keep it
Yeah.
straight. And so we just put a list in the front of the book.
Yeah.
And they do seem very real to me, especially Maggie and Robert, who are the carryover characters in the second book. But that team is going to be involved in many of these stories. And then I'm going to have a separate section for the characters in each book. So, yeah, I think it's important to see these characters as real people.
It's a nice touch. I think more authors should follow your lead on that one. I think that's a great idea.
Oh, thank you.
It's really good. So we'll have a link for that in the show notes. Everybody go check out BonnieMooreBooks.com. We'll have a link for that. And again, as you buy Bonnie's book and future books, make sure, as Bonnie talked about, leave a review. I think it really helps Bonnie to know what part of the story resonated with you, why you love the characters and the plot and everything about the book. It helps other people connect with the book as well. So as readers, that's something that all of us can do, is support our authors that we love by leaving a detailed review. I think that's something we can all commit to. Bonnie, thank you so much for being here and being on the show. I would love to have you back as you continue to write in the future. Keep us in mind. We'd like to get an update from you in the future as well.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to come back.
Excellent. Everybody, all the information for Bonnie in the show notes, as always. Again, Bonnie, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Bet. Take care.
Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. Glad to have you here. I just want to let you know that you can always find out what we're doing live in the moment by going to our YouTube channel. Head over to livingthenextchapter.com. There'll be a link right there. Head over to our YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things that all the YouTubers love to say. And in our YouTube channel, a couple things. You're going to get advanced listens. You're going to get the episodes that we're working on in real time. So we record and post daily on our YouTube channel. I'd love for you to give us a follow over there. As well, we're making playlists. We have over 500 episodes. So finding the right episode for you, we're trying to group things into playlists. So if you like children's books, if you like business, you like historical fiction, we're grouping our authors together to make it a little easier for you to find your favorite next author. So head over to livingthenextchapter.com. And again, I'd love to hear from you. Hearing from the listeners of the show is great. And I just want to say thank you for being a part of the podcast family. And I look forward to having you back for the next episode. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time and your listen. Take care.